originally the idea of doing this interview came up because obviously I went to the Band-Maid concert and I tried desperately to get some interviews whilst I was there. However, after that, obviously, you yourself, you run a very, very active Facebook group for the band, like a fan group for the band. So I guess my first question is, how did you first actually discover Band-Maid? How did you discover their music?
Uh, I think I'm kind of, I guess, the Western first wave. Thrill popped up in my feed, listening to other Japanese bands. It didn't grab me initially. I explored them a little bit, then Real Existence came out. I'm like, oh, that's an okay song. But Nonfiction Days is what really, really grabbed me and pulled me in, and it's been nonstop since.
So, I mean, was there a particular reason? Was there something that you noticed that was different about their writing style? Obviously, once they were taking over around that point.
With a lot of the Japanese bands that I was listening to at the time, harkened back to my roots, which is 80s metal, hard rock, everything from the Poison glam all the way up to the Metallica, Slayer, Exodus stuff. It just had that 80s feel, and it kind of was very nostalgic for me.
So it does remind you a lot of the Western music, but it's also got, I guess you could say, a bit of a Japanese style to the writing as well. Do you find actually when you listen to Japanese bands like this that there is something distinctly sort of unique about their sound, or is it just more about the ethos? Is it more about the way they play? Um, is there anything that stands out as being particularly different, or is it just a sort of they're very good at doing hard rock?
Kind of a tough question. I guess it's a little bit of both. It's very nostalgic, but at the same time, it's very meticulous, which is indicative of Japanese anything. There's a purpose to it. There's a direction to it, and it's very polished on its face.
Yeah. I think that's something that most people could agree with. I mean, I think Band-Maid probably more than most bands as well. You see the amount of time that they spend going in, passing around the songs, doing them to death, and then handing them back out. So before you got into Band-Maid, which were the Japanese bands that you were listening to, and how did you get into them?
Okay, so this started in I want to say 2013. A friend of mine was watching NHK and saw a video from Dazzle Vision. He's like, "Hey, this sounds like something you would like." So he sent me Dazzle Vision, and I liked it. And then from there, it was Exist Trace. And then after Exist Trace, then YouTube started blowing me up with other stuff. And then it was Alias, Mary's Blood, Cynthia, everything, all the girl groups. Because once you go down one direction with them, they just slam all this other stuff in your face,
Yes.
and it just never, it never ended with the options. Somewhere in there, Baby Metal came along, but I'm not one of these guys who found Band-Maid through Baby Metal. There was all kinds of other stuff first.
Yeah. I think that it is true that Baby Metal have opened up a lot of doors. If obviously they're not the only way of getting into the music, but I think they have opened a lot of doors for a lot of people who weren't previously into Japanese music at all. And do you tend to find that there is a lot of crossover of, well, I'm guessing from your answer, probably yes, of fans who've come to Band-Maid through Baby Metal?
There's a lot of crossover, and then there's also a lot of Band-Maid isn't Baby Metal. They play their own instruments. So there's definitely two camps,
Yeah.
and I think we do a pretty good job of keeping those fans at the very least civil. But there isn't the toxicity in the Band-Maid fan group that you'll find in the Baby Metal fan group, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the Baby Metal fans, obviously, I mean, you have to accept, obviously, they have such a vast fan base anyway that you're going to get a little bit of everything. I do think that with Baby Metal, though, because they manage to appeal to an audience who almost have a sort of a pop understanding of music. As a result, they get a lot more fans who are not your traditional music fans, which is great for hoovering up new listeners, but also means that you get kind of a bit of a more bizarre fan base occasionally. I think with a Band-Maid, I've been quite surprised how genuinely willing to discuss music a lot of their fans are. I mean, one thing that I always try and do, and I always try and say with the reviews I do, is I try to be honest and I try to deliberately look for things that I think make certain songs better and therefore make them worse than equivalent songs. And I tend to find that that has not led me to really much conflict with anything except for the most extreme of fans. Do you think, I mean, in your opinion, have you come across many examples of fans in, not in so much the Facebook community, but in general on the internet, fans of Band-Maid who are, shall we say, not willing to accept any failing ever on the band's part? Which is something I think you do sometimes get.
If I understand, you're asking me, are there people who put them on such a high pedestal that they can do no wrong?
Yeah, they, if you like, they have a somewhat of an unrealistic view of the band. I mean, everything they do is perfect by definition.
Of course, they're out there, and that's one of the problems with the baby metal fans. They're just they're zealotous, basically.
Yeah.
There is a and look, I'm not knocking on baby metal. I've been a fan for a while. I've seen them multiple times. It's just there's a difference in the fan base, and I think it is just pure a volume issue, like you had mentioned.
Yeah.
But with Band-Maid, I think you get a lot of people who either have a musical background, have been musicians for a long time, and are willing to share their insights and their opinions of it. And the layman fan base, I guess, for a lack of a better word, is very accepting of that input, and it seems to kind of broaden out the fan base as a whole.
I think that actually sounds like quite a fair assessment of it. One thing that therefore would be, this is a question that I think personally I come around to more than maybe a lot of normal Band-Maid fans. Now the reason being is because obviously we have to accept that Band-Maid are at heart, they're very much a hard rock band. And this also, I think, appeals to what you were saying about how you got into them in the first place. Now, one of my greatest beliefs with them is that they're a band with a lot of musical talent, a lot of musicianship on display. I do wonder, though, when they try to veer into doing anything which gets them away from hard rock too much, you do feel a bit of a pushback, that people do almost worry that they're not going to be hard rock. At some point they'll stop doing hard rock. Now, I don't believe they ever will stop doing hard rock, but do you feel that when they do anything that veers too far from their normal sound, that maybe there is a pushback from certain quarters?
Okay, so you're talking to me directly right now. On our Facebook group, I am highly critical of Start Over. Not a big fan of that song at all, mainly because of the video is just so cheese with the cutscenes.
Yes.
And when they played it live, I actually enjoyed it, but not a fan of that song. But at the same time, I love Made in Japan. There's some amazing music on there.
Yeah.
So, but there are people who will go, they hear something that's not quite right. Let's say Endless Story. And then they start getting all wound up that they're not going to be the hard rock band they've always been. But I've been a Slayer fan going back to the 80s, and when South of Heaven came out, people freaked out that they were slowing down. I don't have that worry with Band-Maid. They're going to be fine.
So yeah, I mean, I think as you may be aware, I agree very much on the Start Over video. That video was almost painful to watch. However, I really enjoyed the song. I thought the song, it appealed to me because it opened up a different area of what they did. But I must admit, there's been other areas, like very much with the first album with Made in Japan, and with the most recent album, starting out with Page as being the opening song. I thought that was a brave move to put Page front and center at the beginning of the album. Did you see that as them kind of trying to sort of show, if you like, there was almost like an excitement to show this new thing that they were doing, this sort of new mid-tempo extravaganza that they were kind of giving us?
So you're talking to me again directly.
I suspect so.
So when I heard Page for the first time, I'm like, the hell is this? You're going to open an album with this song? And and again, there's two camps. There's like, oh, Page is an amazing opener, and there's the people like me at the time, like, what the hell is this? I even advocated originally, play the album backwards, it's better. Start with Ring. But but I have come to absolutely love Page. It's a tone setter. It's that kind of, the storm clouds are on the horizon. You're getting just a basic indication of what's coming, and I've completely done a 180 on that. Page is amazing.
I must admit, actually, I do agree with your assessment, whether you still hold to this, that the album does play better in reverse. In a strange way, because Page, although I like it as an opener, it is a very grand finishing song as well. It would be a fantastic way to finish. I did feel that Rene was a tad of an abrupt ending to the album, actually. I thought that it was so grand that Rene was such a fast and heavy song that it felt like the album ended on something of a cliff edge. Whether that be intentional, I'm assuming it is. It felt like a very sudden way to end it. So I'm assuming that you are, I haven't actually read your opinion on this one, but I'm assuming you are a fan of Rene. Rene, you're one of the people who is very much in support of that song. So I have to ask you, what did you think of the Rene video?
Very raw. It was, I think for someone who is just finding them, might be a little kind of confused by that. That'd be a weird first one to have, especially given the, I hate the term, but kind of the kawaii look of the band.
Yeah.
With that very harsh, 8mm feel to the video. But as a long-term fan, I think it was a really cool video. It fit the song really well. It was paced really well, so it fits really good if you already had at least a basic introduction to the band.
Yeah, I think that if you've seen their videos before, you can see how it's a similar thing but recorded in a very different way. For me, it gave me a kind of a motion sickness after a while because I couldn't see what was happening. I felt like I was doing like an optician's test, but in like a storm or something. I can't see what's going on. So for me, it was a little bit of a difficult one to watch, but I could kind of see that was one that I could see why people liked it just from an opinion perspective. I found that a bit difficult to work with. So moving on to the live performance. Now this is a big one. From what you've said and from what I can gather anyway, you've seen quite a lot of live performances by quite a lot of bands. So I'm assuming you're quite experienced with the live set. How do you think, considering obviously the limitations on what you can actually do on a stage to make a show different, how do you think that Band-Maid stand out from other shows, from other bands?
Well, having seen them 4 times. I saw them at a J-Pop Summit. That was my first time. It was essentially a showcase. They had about 30 minutes. The stage was a little bit bigger, and they had room to move around. Yeah. The other LA shows were all small club shows, small stage, so there's not really the opportunity for them to move around. It was a club show, so I think they used the stage well. And one of the things that is just so endearing about them in a live setting is that they are so interactive with each other and having so much fun that you can't help but have fun with them. So even though it's a small stage, it's still they bring you in, I guess.
Yeah. I think that's a quality that I've always kind of said this. Even if you have a band who don't have any good songs and aren't even that good musicians, if they have the right ability to connect to the audience and they know what works with the audience, then they can really make something out of nothing. So obviously, if you've got a band who already has a good collection of songs, then you can create something really quite special with the right personalities. Vice versa, I have seen some bands who've been fantastic live and have engaged with the audience not at all, resulting in something of a stale show. So, if we're sort of juxtaposing that to Western bands, do you think there's many Western bands who have that sense of fun? Because I can think of some, but I can also think of a lot of Western bands who are very stoic on stage.
If I was going to pick one, even though the musical style is pretty different, I would say Pantera, because having seen them live multiple times as well, Dime is kind of like Akane in that he's never not smiling, and he is just loving the moment and just in it, and you can't help but smile when you're watching this dude just destroy a guitar. The same thing with Akane destroying the kit.
Absolutely. I think that I've mentioned this a few times on my channel before, but I used to spend a lot of time working with a studio that was underneath a music shop, and I'd go in there. The music shop was an old fella, and he always hated bands who were miserable. He always said, you're playing music, you should be enjoying it. And they used to have those music magazines that got delivered to the shop regularly, just to advertise products and things. But we would play a game where every time they had the new one, we'd go through trying to find anyone who was smiling, any band photograph where any members were smiling. And typically no one was ever smiling. And if we found one, then we would just usually cut out their picture and put them on our little wall of fame. So it became clear that there is this thing where sometimes the attitude, like the band attitude, can be a bit much for some bands. So do you think, like, when you're looking at Band-Maid having this maid outfit sort of thing, this whole kawaii, if you like, persona, do you think that actually helps them a lot? Do you think the persona, the whole image, actually helps them elevate beyond just the music?
Because it's been, what, 6 years now?
Yeah.
The band's been around. It's like an integral part of them. While I think they would still be perfectly fine without it, and you can see over the years that they're slowly kind of drifting away. The only ones who are really maids left are Kanami and Miku.
Yeah.
But I think that kind of like the Aldius ball gown era, it's that juxtaposition between the hard music and the kind of cutesy look. You get that you get that you're sucked in by the appearance, and you hear the music, oh wow, that's kind of weird, and it makes you listen a little more intently, and once you can peel apart the musicianship, and that's where they just absolutely shine.
Because I must admit, the very first time I ever heard them, I'd admit that I'd seen their image and I'd heard of them through people prior to actually listening to them on the channel. And the first time I heard them, the thing that really struck me was, in a way, I expected there to be a link between, if you like, the gimmick. And I've always said I never consider a gimmick to be a bad thing. I mean, gimmick can be a very good thing if you make it part of the actual atmosphere, part of the whole attitude. And so I kind of expected the music to equally have this sort of gimmick. And instead, what it was just very high quality, which to me was a little bit unusual. I do wonder, therefore, and with myself and yourself being more familiar with Japanese music before we'd heard them, do you think that maybe their image actually could somehow, if you like, slightly put off Western fans in, sort of getting new Western fans? Do you think it could actually work against them on the international stage?
Yes, and for a couple of reasons. We're going to circle back around. It's the baby metal effect.
Yeah.
Because they're singing and dancing, they're not playing their instruments, even though the Kame band is amazing. And I think another thing, and one of the things that initially didn't grab me about Band-Maid and hearing Thrill for the first time, is that Miku's guitar was essentially a prop. And it's very apparent in certain parts of the video. She's not playing, she's just holding it.
Yeah.
So I think that was one of the reasons that was an initial put off for me. But now that they're obviously playing their instruments, and Miku has become a legitimate rhythm guitar player, not so much anymore.
So I suspect, therefore, because of the fact you got into the band in the era when they were kind of learning to be themselves, whereas now they're more of a complete package, you'd say.
And it was the whole getting extra freedom, not having to play somebody else's songs.
Yeah.
And you listen to the Made in Japan songs, and there are, even though they're not writing those songs, there are flashes of musical brilliance.
Yeah.
Some of Konami's playing is just like, wow, I'm not expecting this from a pop album. And then it's been a pleasure to grow with them musically, where they've just kind of found their niche and where they're comfortable. So that's certainly not an issue anymore.
Yeah, I think that's a fair thing to say. I mean, I liked a lot of things tonally about Made in Japan. I like the fact that it actually had quite a lot of variation in what they seemed to be going for. Although musically it was much simpler than what they do now, and you could hear spaces where you think, well, the current Band-Maid would have put more in there. Like you say, you do get the feeling that you get to grow with them, and I think they grew musically to the point where it was okay for them to take over their own songs. So with them moving on, I've heard lots of comments, including on your group, about things that people wanted them to do writing-wise, things that people wanted them to try, and various things like this. If it was up to you and you could request something for them to do, something tonally, like a shift in style, or something for them to experiment with, what do you think it would be?
Oh man. uh I don't know that there is something in particular, something that came up on one of the other groups, not the one that I admin. Someone had suggested them or having them cover a major act band, and they suggested Metallica, and that became a thought exercise. What would be a good Metallica song for them to cover? So I think the next step for them, and I know they did the Muck song. Maybe some Western band covers, just to see what their interpretation of is it. Because if you get into like experimental stuff, I'm not looking for like them to start doing Sgt. Pepper's type stuff. Just do what you're good at.
I think that's fair. Yeah, I think that's fair. You're in Los Angeles, I believe, aren't you? If I remember correctly.
Yeah, Southern California.
Okay, so I'm interested. How many people do you know in your sort of area who also listen to Japanese music, or is it quite a rare thing?
A handful. One of the other admins lives locally. There's a couple of guys who are into the alt idol scene that are around here. I'd say 6 to 8 that I'm familiar with. Okay. But you go to the shows and I'm one of the morons that lines up before the sun comes up so I can be on the rail. So, and there's a group. No, there's a group of, I guess there's probably 10 or 15 that I'm familiar with that are at least close enough that they can get to these shows without flying.
Oh yeah, actually that's true, isn't it? Obviously you've got the size of your country is a big factor that I hadn't considered.
Right.
Which other artists, obviously we've mentioned Band-Maid and Baby Metal, which other artists would you be excited to see coming across?
Oh man. I'd like to see Aldius again. I went and saw them when they were at NAMM. But again, it was like a 30-minute showcase. They did 6 songs, they blasted them out, and they were done because they were playing on one of these, and they're using all rented equipment. It's like, here's your guitar, plug into this Marshall, play your songs, and get off.
Wow.
So I'd like to see them do a full set. I think Mary's Blood would be phenomenal. I just don't know that there's enough of a fan base. I mean, they probably have a fair amount of Band-Maid crossover.
Yeah.
Right now, I up front it would be them. It would be Aldius and probably Mary's Blood.
That makes sense.
Oh, maybe Bride Ear. Bride Ear 2 would be fun.
Right, Bride Ear is the next one I've got to check out. So I'm still waiting to get onto the Bride Ear train, and when I do, I'll be able to report what I think of that one as well. A lot of Bride Ear fans online. I'm finding a lot of Bride Ear fans online. So who would you say is at the moment, or if there are any, is there any particular up-and-coming Japanese bands who you've only just found, or who've maybe only just sort of arrived in the last year or so, who you think are going in a good direction, who you can kind of see a similar process like with Band-Maid, where there's a promise?
Man, up-and-coming, that's hard to say. See, I've stopped exploring because it's gotten too expensive. I've had to kind of rein it in because I throw myself into stuff. So
yeah,
I spent an asinine amount of money on Japanese music and merch and whatnot. So not too much. And I dabble a little bit in like the alternative idol scene as well, and that's extensively expensive if you want to collect stuff.
Yes, there are certain shops in Tokyo dedicated to certain musical genres, and if you go past anything related to the alternative idol scene, do you see the prices through the window? It's not cheap.
Well, and they released 10 versions of the same album with alternate, kind of like what they did with the latest album, the different covers.
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting choice, shall we say. Interesting choice to have. The minute they did it, you could kind of see, and I remember when I got my one through, at first I was unsure how to feel about the fact that the alternate cover wasn't actually the cover. It was in there as a separate inlay, and you had to take it out replace it and put in the alternate cover to the front yourself. I thought this is
Ah,
it's an interesting way of doing this. But then I thought actually that's probably a good thing because it actually means I've got both covers. So actually I've got double the cover. So I thought that was an interesting choice. Talking of the financial side of it. Now this applies both to Japanese and Western music, but I know this is a particular thing with Japanese music. When you go to the concerts, there tends to be a lot of added extras, i.e., the difference between a ticket and a VIP ticket is usually an insanely large amount of money. Um, have you ever actually tried purchasing one of these VIP tickets, or tried going for one of these really sort of I guess you say sort of special tickets with all the extras, with everything, with the backstage or the meet and greet? Have you ever tried one of those before?
okay, so that's the only way I do these.
Oh, okay, all right.
So we, like I said, our little Facebook group, when we know if they've announced a tour somewhere, we get together, and then usually there's 5 or 6 of us, and if someone doesn't have the money, someone else will front them and make sure they get the VIP, and then we do the little payback. So no, every time I've seen a Band-Maid show, it's been VIP. So I've got the little signed photos, and I got the picture with them at J-Pop Summit, and but they're not. Band-Maid is actually reasonable, and we're going to circle back to Baby Metal again. Uh, their VIP is stupid expensive, and after the Palladium show, and just I would never do a VIP for them again. It wasn't handled correctly.
Really? So
Yeah.
that was actually moving on to my next question. Assumedly, I think you might be alluding to this. Is how well do you think that they actually, if you like, administer the extras? You know, how well are you given a reasonable amount of time to do things? Is there much rush? I mean,
Mm.
how well did you feel that? And you can give different examples. You know, Band-Maid, Baby Metal. How do you think that it's handled when you get your extras after the show and you get to meet and greet and such like?
It's been fine with no complaints with Band-Maid whatsoever, and it's been what they've done before. It's like, hey, this is what time VIP is. This is where the lineup is. And the fans, like I said, it's that group of 10 or 15, at least here in LA. We kind of police ourselves really well. There's usually a guy with a marker, so you get your number written on your hand, and that's your spot in line based on how you showed up. And then we go in, we get our little, they sign a picture, you get to speak a few words in Japanese if you can spit it out without sounding stupid. And then they file you. It's been one place it was you went in, you got your photo, they filed you back outside to line up again, and another one was you got your photo and then you just bum rushed the stage and waited.
Oh, really?
So, right, it could because they were inside the venue,
Yeah.
and it wasn't. I didn't have a problem with it, but also I was toward the front of the line, so it wasn't really an issue for me. I don't know how it was for people further back, so I can't.
Yeah. Oh, well, I imagine if you've paid for the VIP, you've probably worked your way somewhere somewhere to the front of the venue. But so it was being done kind of at the front of the venue. Was it actually at the back, or was it actually in, like you say, the main venue area?
Okay, so
Just trying to get a
for
picture for this.
yeah, the show in 2018 in LA, they brought you inside to the hall because it was an upstairs venue. You go upstairs, uh, you they give you a little postcard size, and then they fight. You went over to merch, and if you wanted merch, you can get it. And then you went back outside and got in line, waited for the show. That seemed pretty smooth, at least from where I was. This last one here was they filed you in, you did your autographs or whatever, merch was there, and then it was the stage. It was all you could, in theory, skipped your photo and went straight to the stage.
I see what you mean. Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's actually quite a. I guess I can see the mentality behind that. Most of the ones I've ever done, it's been a case of, like you say, they just feed you back round into the line, and then just it's a separate thing. They do that as one thing, and then they do everything else as a separate
Hmm.
entity. I think that's just an organisational thing, but maybe in a smaller venue they don't have to worry about this so much. Generally, in regards to Japanese music, the way that Japanese music's going, you can say this either as comparison to the Western music scene or just on its own. What do you think is, if you like, the direction that it's going in? Do you think it's going in a good direction? What do you think are the sort of qualities, if you like, a sort of conclusion on why I guess we listen to Japanese music? What makes it special?
It's the musicianship, plain and simple. I mean, I'm a guitar player going all the way back to the 80s, like I said before. So it's and at least with the big bands that I listen to, the Band-Maids, the Aliases, the Mary's Blood, the Love Bites, the musicianship is through the roof. And I think with Band-Maid in particular, it is engineered and layered so well. And you've noted it in some that the Easter eggs are in the second verse. You come out of that first chorus, and then Misa is doing these complicated runs, or Akane's doing these ridiculous patterns, or Konami's doing some little weird tap thing. It is just constructed so well that that level of musicianship has been missing from the West for quite a while, save a few bands.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And so, you've got, really, it's a question of quality and, I think, care of detail. I think it's the amount of love that goes into crafting and creating a song, especially considering that Band-Maid up until recently seem to have been really, their previous companies were really rushing them through the studio, really, pushing them in, getting them out the other side really quickly. And even then, they managed to turn out the level of quality and attention to detail that they did. So, yeah, I can absolutely see that. All right, I am going to say then, for the interview, I'm going to pop stop in a minute. But just to say, first of all, thank you so much for doing this with me. And thank you so much for giving your opinions. It is really a genuine pleasure to have someone who actually is both a musician, knows about music, and has been very much in touch with the fans for quite a while. So I really appreciate getting your opinions on that. And yeah, thank you very much.